Millionaire husband called her Barren. Then she left an envelope at a luxury dinner that ended his. Before we dive into this powerful story of love, betrayal, and redemption, make sure you subscribe to Valentino Love Stories Red Heart, because every week, we bring you heart-touching tales that remind us, true love doesn't die, it simply waits to be rediscovered. Now, imagine being called Barren by the man you gave your world to. Imagine walking away in silence, but leaving behind an envelope that would destroy his pride and rewrite your fate. This is her story. Emotional goal: build empathy, show both sides, reveal her silent suffering. The soft glow of candlelight flickered against the marble walls of the Prescott Mansion in Los Angeles. Everything about the house screamed success: the crystal chandelier, the imported Italian art, the grand piano that hadn't been played in years. But inside the walls, there was silence, a cold, calculated quiet that money couldn't fill. Amelia Carter Prescott, 32, sat across from her husband at the dinner table, staring into a glass of untouched wine. Her dark skin shimmered under the light, her natural curls tied into a neat bun, her poise betraying none of the storms inside her. Across from her sat Richard Prescott, 38, a man the world admired. To the press, he was California's golden billionaire. To Amelia, he was a stranger, one who once promised forever, but now barely saw her at all. "Amelia," Richard said, setting down his fork, "you missed the charity event again." People were asking questions. "I can't keep making excuses for you." She looked up, her brown eyes steady. "You could have told them the truth, that your wife wasn't feeling well." His jaw tightened. "You're always not feeling well. Maybe if you stopped moping around and started focusing on what a wife should do." Her breath hitched. She knew what was coming. He'd said it before, in arguments, in whispers, in those cruel moments when his ego outweighed his heart. He leaned back, his tone turning colder. "Maybe then you'd finally give me a child." The words landed like a knife. The air around her stilled. The soft jazz from the dining room suddenly sounded distant, haunting. She whispered, "Don't do this, Richard." "Do what?" he asked sharply. "Speak the truth. We've been married 7 years, Amelia. 7 years, and nothing. The doctors said you." She cut him off, her voice trembling. "The doctors said we both needed time. But you only heard what your pride wanted to hear." He laughed bitterly. "My pride? You think this is about pride? You think I wanted this humiliation? Everyone in my circle asking when I'll have an heir, and I have no answer." Tears burned her eyes, but she held them back. "You have no heir, Richard, but not because of me, because you stopped being a husband long before you became obsessed with being a father." He slammed his hand on the table, his voice echoing across the marble floor. "Don't twist this on me. You're the barren one, Amelia." The word hung heavy between them, cruel, final, shattering. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock above the fireplace, counting down the seconds of a dying marriage. Amelia rose slowly, her dignity wrapped around her like armor. She whispered, "I may be barren, Richard, but you're empty." He looked at her, but for once, had nothing to say. She walked away, her heels clicking softly across the floor. And though her heart cracked with every step, her face remained calm. Because something inside her had broken, and sometimes, when something breaks, what's left is the strength you never knew you had. 3 weeks later, Los Angeles shimmered with luxury as Richard hosted a private dinner at the exclusive Vera Heights Club, celebrating a new business merger. He stood in his tuxedo, the picture of control, surrounded by politicians, investors, and socialites who praised his brilliance. But amid the laughter and champagne, he kept glancing toward the door. He hadn't seen Amelia since their fight. She'd packed her things quietly, left their mansion, and disappeared. His lawyer said she hadn't filed for divorce, but she also hadn't reached out. Still, he told himself she'd come tonight. She always did. No matter how cold things got between them, she never missed an important event. So he waited. And when she finally walked in, every head turned. Amelia glided across the marble floor in a golden gown that shimmered like sunlight. Her beauty silenced the room. Her confidence wasn't the kind that came from wealth. It was the quiet grace of a woman who had finally stopped begging to be seen. Richard froze. His drink slipped slightly in his hand. She smiled faintly as she approached him, polite, distant, unreadable. "Amelia," he breathed. "You came." I did, she said softly. I wanted to say goodbye, properly. He frowned. Goodbye. Before he could ask more, she reached into her clutch and pulled out a white envelope. She placed it gently on his dinner plate. What's this? He asked, confused. Her eyes softened. The truth. Then, with a grace that stunned everyone, she turned and walked out, leaving behind whispers, stares, and one man whose arrogance was about to crumble. Richard tore open the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were 2 ultrasound photos. At the bottom of the letter, written in her neat handwriting, were just 6 words. I wasn't Barren. I was broken by you. He stared, his heart hammering. Then, in smaller print below the photos, another line. Goodbye, Richard. Your child will know peace, even if you never do. The glass in his hand slipped and shattered. For the first time in years, Richard Prescott, the millionaire who once thought he had everything, felt what real loss tasted like. Speech balloon. What would you do if someone you loved called you Barren, and later learned you carried their child? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, subscribe to Valentino Love Stories Sparkling Heart for more heart-piercing tales of love, betrayal, and redemption. Emotional goal, transformation through pain, self-discovery, rebirth, and fate's turning point. The night Amelia left that envelope was the night she let go of the last piece of the woman who once begged to be loved. Outside the luxury dinner hall, her limousine waited. But she didn't rush in. She stood beneath the city lights, letting the breeze kiss away her tears. The Los Angeles skyline glittered in the distance, the same city where she'd once dreamed of building a family, a life, a forever. Now, it was the city where she'd learned how fragile love could be when pride was stronger than patience. She placed a protective hand over her flat stomach. It was still early, just a few months, but she could already feel life blooming inside her, fragile yet strong. Ped into the car and told the driver softly, "Take me home." Not the Prescott mansion. My home. 2 hours south of Los Angeles, the Pacific waves crashed gently against the shore near a quiet coastal town called Silver Bay. Amelia had inherited a small beach house from her grandmother, a place she hadn't visited in years. Now, it became her sanctuary. She spent her days painting, her nights journaling, and her mornings sitting on the porch, listening to the ocean whisper stories of peace and new beginnings. Her belly grew. So did her courage. The woman who once lived for another's approval now lived for her child, and for herself. One evening, as she watched the sunset spill gold across the waves, she whispered, "I used to think love meant staying, even when it hurt. Now I know, sometimes, love means walking away." Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Richard Prescott's life began to crumble. The night of the dinner, news of the envelope spread like wildfire. His investors whispered behind his back, socialites gossiped, and the media called it the envelope scandal. At first, he denied it. He claimed Amelia had forged everything, that she was emotionally unstable. But when her doctor's confirmation letter surfaced, he was silenced by the truth. And what hurt most wasn't the humiliation, it was the absence. For the first time in years, the mansion was quiet, truly quiet. No soft laughter in the morning. No smell of her jasmine perfume. No warmth on the other side of the bed. He began to notice the emptiness he'd created. He stopped going to social events. He ignored business calls. He'd drive aimlessly at night, ending up outside her old favorite coffee shop, the one she used to visit every Saturday morning, reading poetry with her hair tied in a bun. He'd sit there for hours waiting, hoping she'd walk in. But she never did. And every time he saw another couple laughing together, he felt a knife twist in his chest. Weeks turned into months. Richard finally sat at his study desk one night, unable to sleep. He took out a blank sheet of paper and began to write. Amelia. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't even deserve the memory of you. I called you Barren because I was broken, not you. I measured love by what it could give me, not what it already was. If our child ever asks who I am, don't lie. Tell them I was a fool who lost everything because he forgot what mattered. But also tell them that I loved you, even if I was too blind to show it. Richard. He never sent the letter. He folded it and tucked it inside the first drawer of his desk, next to their old wedding photo. It would stay there for years. Time passed, and with each passing day, Amelia grew stronger. When her baby was born, it was a quiet, rainy night. The nurse handed her the tiny bundle, wrapped in a white blanket. "A boy," the nurse whispered softly. "He's healthy." Tears filled Amelia's eyes as she held her son close. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "Welcome to the world, Daniel. You are proof that broken hearts can still create miracles." That night, as the rain washed against the hospital window, Amelia smiled for the first time in months. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a mother. And her son's heartbeat became the music that healed her soul. Ething extraordinary. She used her savings and her late father's connections to launch Eterna Essence, a luxury skincare and wellness brand inspired by healing, nature, and rebirth. Her message was simple: beauty is not in perfection, it's in resilience. Her products became a sensation, not because of marketing, but because of her story. People saw her strength. Women who had been called names, broken down, or shamed for what they couldn't give, saw hope in Amelia's rise. Within a year, Eterna Essence became $1 million brand. By year 2, it had expanded internationally. And Amelia Carter, once known as the barren wife of a billionaire, was now a millionaire in her own right. She no longer lived in her husband's shadow. She became her own sunrise. 2.5 years later, the world had moved on, but fate hadn't forgotten. It was the night of the California Business Excellence Gala, a luxury dinner honoring entrepreneurs who had made an impact in the last 2 years. Amelia, dressed in an elegant sapphire gown, walked into the hall as flashes from cameras filled the air. Tonight was special. It was her birthday, and she was to receive an award for building a $10 million wellness empire from nothing. As she took her seat, she smiled gracefully, unaware of the storm waiting to unfold. Because across the room, seated at another table, older, quieter, and with eyes that carried regret, sat Richard Prescott. He hadn't known she'd be there. And when he saw her, radiant, confident, alive, he froze. But what truly shattered him was the woman standing beside him, Lydia, the one he dated briefly after Amelia left. Lydia's hand rested gently over her swollen belly. She was pregnant. And in that moment, the universe flipped the script. Amelia, the woman he'd called Barren, stood at the center of the room, celebrated for her strength and success. While he, once untouchable, now sat in the shadow of his own shame, with a child he wasn't even sure he wanted. When the announcer called her name, "Please welcome Amelia Carter, founder and CEO of Eterna Essence, the woman whose story inspired millions." The room erupted in applause. Richard's chest tightened. He clapped, but his eyes filled with tears. She walked up to the podium, elegant as ever. But when her gaze brushed his, her expression faltered, just for a moment. She hadn't expected to see him either. The past collided with the present, love, pain, and destiny tangled in one impossible heartbeat. She took a deep breath and smiled at the audience. "Thank you. They say some stories begin with love. Mine began with heartbreak. I was told I couldn't create life, but I learned that creating hope is also a kind of birth. So to every woman who's ever been called less than enough, know this: your worth isn't tied to what you can give someone else. It's tied to the love you give yourself." Applause thundered through the hall. And Richard could only watch, silently breaking inside. Because sometimes, the greatest punishment isn't revenge. It's witnessing the strength of the person you destroyed, and realizing they never needed you to rise. The applause from the gala still echoed in Amelia's mind as she stepped outside into the cool California night. Her award, a sleek glass plaque engraved with her name, glimmered under the soft moonlight. It was her birthday. She'd built $1 million empire. She'd survived what was meant to destroy her. And yet, her hands trembled. Because inside that same building, only a few feet away, sat the man who once broke her into pieces, the man whose name still had the power to stir memories she thought she'd buried. Richard Prescott. The name alone sent 1,000 old feelings rushing back, the laughter, the promises, the nights they dreamt of a future that never came. But those feelings were ghosts now, and Amelia had long learned that ghosts don't deserve a home in your heart. She clutched her coat tighter and began to walk toward her car. The parking lot was almost empty. Only a few cars glistened under the drizzle that had just begun to fall. Then she heard it, Amelia. The voice was soft. Familiar. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Turning slowly, she saw him. Richard stood under a street lamp, his tuxedo slightly damp from the mist, his face pale and tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his once perfectly combed hair was messy, a man who had forgotten how to look powerful. He looked human. "Amelia," he said again, taking a cautious step forward. "Please, just give me a minute." Her heart pounded painfully, but she kept her voice steady. "What could you possibly say that wasn't already said the night you called me Barren?" He flinched. "I deserve that." "No," she said quietly, "you deserve much more than that. You deserve to live with the echo of those words every day." "I do," he whispered. "Every single day." The rain began to fall harder, dotting her hair with tiny droplets. She turned to leave, but he took another step forward, desperation in his eyes. "Please," he said again, voice trembling. "I didn't know, Amelia. I didn't know you were pregnant." She looked back at him, her gaze sharp but full of sorrow. "You didn't care enough to know." He swallowed hard. "I was angry. I was stupid. I was cruel," she cut in. "You were cruel, Richard. And the worst part is, I loved you through it all." Her voice cracked. The admission burned her chest. For a moment, silence hung between them, only the sound of rain and their ragged breathing. Richard stepped closer, his voice low. "I never stopped loving you, Amelia. Not for a single day." She laughed bitterly. "You have a strange way of showing love: humiliation, pride, silence. You called me Barren in front of your staff, Richard. Do you remember that? You made me feel like less than a woman." He clenched his fists, tears mixing with rain. "And it's the worst regret of my life." She looked at him, her expression torn between anger and pity. "I built an empire, Richard," she said softly. "A $10 million company from nothing but pain. I learned how to breathe without you, how to smile again. But every time I looked at my son, I saw the man who doubted me." His eyes widened. "Our son." She nodded slowly. "Daniel. He's 2. He has your eyes." Richard's knees almost gave out. He ran a trembling hand over his face, tears falling freely now. Can I see him?" Amelia hesitated. Her mind screamed no, but her heart, the same heart that had once loved him enough to break, whispered maybe. "Not yet," she said quietly. "You need to understand something first." He looked up at her, desperate. "I don't need your money," she continued. "I don't need your apology, your guilt, or your remorse. I just need you to understand the weight of what you did. Words don't die, Richard. They live in the people you hurt." He nodded, unable to speak. Then she said softly, "I forgave you a long time ago, not for you but for me. Because I refused to let bitterness be my legacy. My son will grow up knowing love, not pain." She opened her purse and pulled out a folded envelope, slightly damp from the drizzle. "This," she said, holding it out, "is something I wrote after I left you. I was going to send it, but I didn't. I kept it as a reminder." He took it with trembling hands. The envelope was old, the ink slightly faded. He carefully unfolded the paper inside. It read, "Richard, I loved you even when you forgot how to love me. I prayed for you even when you turned away. You called me barren, but I was only empty because you stopped watering what we had. I'm leaving, not because I stopped loving you, but because I finally started loving myself. If you ever remember the woman you married, I hope you become the man she deserved. Amelia." When he finished reading, his tears blurred the words. He looked at her, voice breaking. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "You don't," she said softly. "But I gave it anyway." She turned to leave again, but he spoke almost whispering, "Amelia, please. I don't want redemption. I just want a chance to be part of his life, even if it's from afar. Let me do one thing right." Her shoulders trembled. Part of her wanted to walk away forever. But another part, the part that still remembered the man who once held her through storms, hesitated. She turned around slowly. "Come tomorrow," she said quietly. "To Silver Bay. There's a small house by the ocean. Daniel plays there every morning." He nodded, tears streaming. "Thank you." She gave him a sad smile. "Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow isn't for you, it's for him." Then she walked away, the rain washing away what was left of their past. The next day, the ocean shimmered under a golden sunrise. Waves danced across the sand as seagulls flew overhead. Amelia sat on the porch, watching Daniel chase tiny crabs by the shore, his laughter echoing like music. Then she heard a car pull up. Richard stepped out, dressed simply, no suit, no arrogance, just a man stripped of everything except hope. He stopped when he saw Daniel. The little boy turned, curiosity in his big brown eyes. Amelia stood, her heart pounding. Daniel ran back to her, clutching a small shell. "Mommy, look what I found." She smiled softly, brushing his curls. Then she turned toward Richard. "Daniel," she said gently, "this is a friend of Mommy's." Richard knelt down slowly, his voice shaking. "Hi there," he whispered. "That's a beautiful shell you've got." Daniel smiled shyly and handed it to him. "You can have it." Richard's throat tightened as he accepted it, tears filling his eyes. "Thank you, buddy." Amelia watched quietly, her emotions tangled, sadness, relief, and something faintly like healing. For a long time, they just stood there, a broken family, standing at the edge of forgiveness. Later, as Daniel played in the sand, Richard and Amelia sat on the porch together, not as lovers, but as two souls who had finally found the courage to speak their truth. "I'll never ask you to take me back," he said softly. "I know that chapter is closed. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the kind of man our son can look up to." Amelia looked at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "That's all I ever wanted, for you to understand love isn't about control or power. It's about presence." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe I can start by being present." She smiled faintly. "One step at a time." They sat in silence, watching Daniel build sandcastles. And as the waves rolled in, Amelia realized something she hadn't before. Sometimes love doesn't come back to be rekindled, it comes back to be redeemed. Emotional goal: deliver the story's emotional peak, confrontation, redemption, and the beginning of forgiveness. The ocean breeze was soft that morning. The smell of salt and hope drifted through the air as Richard helped Daniel gather seashells. Amelia watched from the porch, her arms crossed gently, eyes soft yet uncertain. It had been 2 weeks since that rainy night when Richard found her again. 2 weeks of quiet mornings, cautious smiles, and unexpected peace. Every day he came early, never late, helping Daniel build sandcastles, reading him picture books, teaching him how to skip stones. He never once asked for more. He never once tried to cross boundaries. He was simply there, present, patient, changed. Amelia found herself watching him more than she wanted to admit. Sometimes, when Daniel would laugh, that deep, genuine laugh that only children have, she'd catch Richard smiling through tears, as if every moment with his son was a miracle he didn't deserve. And maybe it was. One afternoon, as Daniel napped inside, Amelia stood on the porch, sipping tea. Richard walked up quietly, brushing sand off his jeans. "You've gotten good with him," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "He's easy to love." She looked down at her cup, then back at him. "He is. But that doesn't mean you get to walk back into our lives and pretend nothing happened." He nodded slowly. "I don't expect that. I don't expect forgiveness or love. I just want a chance to be better than the man you left." Amelia studied him for a long moment. He wasn't the same man who had once sat in boardrooms shouting at assistants, who measured worth in status and silence. There was humility in his posture now, a softness in his voice. "I spent years chasing numbers, profits, success," he said quietly. "But none of it filled the hole I created when I lost you. I thought love was control, that power would make me respected. But all it did was make me empty." Her eyes softened. "You sound like a man who's finally listening." He smiled faintly. "I am. And every time Daniel laughs, I hear what love actually sounds like." Amelia turned toward the ocean, blinking back tears. "You hurt me in ways I can't even explain," she whispered. "But you're trying. And that means something." He looked at her, his voice trembling. "I'd do anything for another chance. Not to fix what we had, but to build something better, from truth this time." She didn't answer. But she didn't walk away either. That weekend, the town hosted an annual charity dinner at the coastal hotel overlooking Silver Bay. Amelia had been invited as the guest of honor. Her company had sponsored a fund for single mothers starting small businesses. She hadn't planned to go, but Daniel insisted on seeing Mommy wear her sparkly dress. So she went. When she arrived, the crowd erupted with applause. She looked radiant, dressed in midnight blue, her curls loose, her confidence glowing. Halfway through the evening, as speeches filled the hall, she turned and saw Richard, standing quietly at the back of the room. He wasn't there for attention or recognition. He was there simply to support her. Their eyes met across the room. No words. Just a soft acknowledgement, two hearts speaking in silence. Later that night, after the dinner ended, Richard approached her outside near the balcony overlooking the ocean. "You looked beautiful tonight," he said gently. She smiled. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I wasn't sure if I should come," he admitted. "But I wanted Daniel to see that when his mom wins, his dad claps the loudest." She froze, touched by the sincerity in his tone. He stepped closer, cautious. "I lost you because I was proud," he continued softly. "But pride can't raise a son. Pride can't love a woman. I've spent every day since learning what love actually means, and if all it ever means now is cheering for you from the back of a room, I'll still do it." Tears filled her eyes. "You've changed." He smiled sadly. "I had to. Losing you was my lesson. Loving you was my education." The following morning brought chaos. A storm had rolled in overnight, sharp winds, torrential rain, and crashing waves. Amelia woke to the sound of thunder, and Daniel's small bed, empty. Panic seized her chest. "Daniel!" she screamed, running through the house. No answer. She burst through the door into the rain, heart pounding. "Daniel!" Her eyes darted across the beach, and then she saw him, standing near the water, holding his small red kite against the wind. "Daniel, no!" she cried. "Get back here." But the wind howled, dragging the kite string from his hand. He chased after it, too close to the waves. Before Amelia could move, a tall figure sprinted past her. Richard. He dashed into the surf, calling, "Daniel, don't move." The waves crashed hard, soaking him as he reached the boy, scooping him into his arms just before a huge wave slammed against the shore. Amelia ran to them, tears and rain mixing down her face. Richard carried Daniel back, clutching him tightly. The boy coughed, scared but safe. Amelia dropped to her knees beside them, hugging them both fiercely. For a moment, time stood still, rain pouring, hearts pounding, all three wrapped together like the family they once were. Daniel sobbed into her chest. "Mommy, I lost my kite." She kissed his hair, whispering, "You didn't lose anything, baby. You found everything that matters." When she looked up, Richard's eyes met hers. And in that moment, through the rain and chaos, she saw not the man who broke her, but the man who would now protect what he once destroyed. That night, after the storm passed, they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets while Daniel slept inside. The air was quiet, heavy with unspoken emotions. "You didn't hesitate," Amelia said softly. "You just ran." He shrugged lightly. "He's my son. There was no choice." She looked at him for a long time, her eyes soft but searching. "You're not the man I left, Richard. That man would have called his assistant to handle the storm." He laughed quietly. "That man didn't know what love was. I do now. It's not about power, it's about presence." She smiled faintly. "You keep saying that. Because it's the only truth I've got left." He turned to her, voice trembling. "Amelia, I know I can't undo the pain I caused. But I promise you, every day I have left, I'll use it to make sure our son never doubts his worth. And if someday, somehow, you find it in your heart to love me again, I'll be here, waiting." Her throat tightened. "Richard," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Don't wait for me. Just keep being this man. That's all I want." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. Then she leaned over and placed a soft kiss on his cheek, a gentle, forgiving touch. It wasn't a return to love, not yet. But it was something deeper. It was peace. Later, after he left, Amelia sat by Daniel's bed, watching him sleep. His tiny hand clutched the repaired red kite Richard had fixed that evening. She smiled faintly, whispering to herself, "Maybe love doesn't always come back the same way, but sometimes it returns better, braver, and truer." Her phone buzzed. A message from Richard. "Thank you for today. For trusting me. For letting me be his father. She typed back slowly. Thank you for becoming the man I once prayed you'd be. She stared at the message for a moment before hitting send, a tear rolling down her cheek, not from pain, but from closure. Speech balloon. Would you ever give a second chance to someone who once shattered your heart, if they truly changed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, subscribe to Valentino Love Stories Sparkling Heart, where love, pain, and redemption find their way home. Emotional goal: deliver a satisfying and tear-jerking resolution, love redeemed, pride buried, and new beginnings born from pain. A month later. The mornings were quieter now. Richard still came by to see Daniel, but his visits had grown shorter, more restrained. He was keeping his promise, giving Amelia space, earning her trust, not forcing fate. Amelia noticed it. Every time he smiled at Daniel, a quiet sadness lingered behind it, the kind that comes from loving someone with patience instead of expectation. That morning, as he prepared to leave, Daniel ran out holding the little red kite. Daddy! Don't forget, we have to fly it again tomorrow. Richard smiled, crouching to his level. I'll be there, buddy. I promise. He turned to Amelia, their eyes met, soft, knowing. Thank you, he said gently, for letting me be here. She nodded, her throat tight. You earned it. He smiled faintly, then walked toward his car. Amelia stood at the doorway watching him leave, feeling something strange stirring in her chest, something she thought had died long ago. Not pity. Not nostalgia. But warmth. A week later, Amelia received a silver envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Richard. There's a charity dinner this Friday at the Bellevue. It's for the Women's Foundation, the same one you helped build. They're honoring your work. I'd love for you to come. No expectations, no pressure, just admiration. Always, Richard. She held the note for a long time, her fingers trembling. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every memory of their past, the laughter, the tears, the shattered hopes, replayed in fragments. But now, something new lingered at the edge of those memories: growth. Maybe people really could change. Maybe love wasn't about perfection, but persistence. The Bellevue's ballroom sparkled with gold lights and soft piano music. Guests mingled in elegant gowns and tuxedos, glasses of champagne glimmering under the chandeliers. When Amelia walked in, heads turned. She looked stunning, dressed in white satin, her hair softly pinned back, glowing with quiet confidence. Richard stood near the stage, talking to sponsors. The moment he saw her, his world stopped. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. It felt like seeing a dream he didn't dare believe was real. She approached him slowly. You invited me. I came. He smiled, nervous, humble. You look breathtaking. And you look terrified, she teased lightly. He chuckled. Maybe I am. I never thought I'd get another moment like this. Before either could say more, the host took the stage. And tonight, the speaker announced, we honor Amelia Turner for her tireless dedication to empowering women and single mothers. The room erupted in applause. Richard clapped the loudest. His eyes glistened with pride. Amelia gave a short, emotional speech. But at the end, she paused, her gaze finding Richard in the crowd. Her voice softened. Sometimes, life breaks us not to destroy us, but to teach us what love truly means. And sometimes, the people who hurt us the most become the ones who prove that forgiveness is love's greatest act of courage. The audience fell silent. Richard froze. He knew those words were for him. Tears welled in his eyes as she finished. To everyone out there rebuilding from heartbreak, don't close your heart. Healing doesn't erase the past, but it can give it purpose. Applause filled the room, but Richard didn't move. He just stood there, overwhelmed, his heart unraveling. After the dinner, Amelia stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was cool, stars glittering over the bay. She heard footsteps behind her. Richard's voice came softly. You meant what you said, didn't you? She turned, smiling faintly. Every word. He exhaled shakily. I've waited so long to hear something like that. But I'm not asking for anything more. Just to know I didn't lose you forever. She took a slow step closer. You didn't, she whispered. You lost the woman I was, but you helped me find the woman I became. His breath caught. And her? Does she still believe in love? Amelia looked at him for a long moment, then smiled gently. She's learning to. He stepped closer, eyes shining. Amelia, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you never should have had to fight alone. That you were never barren, just waiting for a love strong enough to grow beside you. Her eyes filled with tears. And you think that's you? He smiled softly. I hope it's me. But if it's not, I'll still be grateful that I got to love you once. Something inside her broke, not from pain, but from release. She reached up, touching his face. You've changed, Richard. And maybe it's time I stop punishing the man who became everything I once prayed for. He froze, unable to speak. Then she leaned in and kissed him. Soft. Slow. Healing. It wasn't the wild passion of their youth, it was gentler, deeper. A kiss of forgiveness. A promise of peace. Weeks later, the beach was alive with laughter. Daniel ran down the sand, holding his red kite high as both his parents watched. Amelia sat on a blanket, smiling, while Richard knelt beside her, helping Daniel tie the string. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and gold. Daniel shouted, Mom. Dad. Look. It's flying. They both looked up. The kite soared high above the ocean, bright and free. Amelia smiled softly. It's beautiful. Richard glanced at her, voice low. So are you. She turned to him, meeting his gaze. This feels right. He nodded. Because it's honest. She leaned against his shoulder as the waves rolled gently nearby. And for the first time in years, her heart didn't ache. It didn't remember betrayal. It remembered rebirth. Months later, Richard and Amelia stood together at the opening of her new foundation, the Red Kite Project, helping single parents rebuild their lives. Reporters asked about the name. Amelia smiled. The red kite represents freedom. It's what my son held onto the day I realized what truly mattered, love that survives storms. Richard slipped his arm gently around her waist. She didn't pull away. They looked at each other, and she whispered, Thank you for not giving up. He smiled. You were always worth the wait. The cameras flashed, but for them, the world disappeared. They had walked through betrayal, pain, and pride, only to find grace, forgiveness, and home. And that, dear viewers, was Millionaire husband called her Barren. Then she left an envelope at a luxury dinner that ended his. A story of pride, heartbreak, and redemption. Because sometimes, the love that once broke you is the same love that helps you heal. Speech Balloon, tell us in the comments. Would you forgive someone who finally became the person you needed all along? Backhand index pointing right. Don't forget to subscribe to Valentino Love Stories Kissmark, where every story reminds you that love, no matter how broken, can always find its way home.